Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Joseph Schorr. Joseph is a Vice President of Strategic Alliances at LogicGate, which is a leading provider of cloud software solutions for automating governance, risk, and compliance processes. Joseph is also an advisor to Dream It Ventures, a growth program and venture fund focused on pre-Series A health tech, secure tech, and urban tech startups. Joseph is helping founders in the secure tech program, which is focused on cybersecurity, anti-fraud, risk compliance, and physical security startups. Joseph, thank you for coming to our interview today.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, Joseph, can you tell us a short story about your unique path in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. I've debated writing a book someday about everything I learned about risk. I discovered making cloth, but I've worked for a company called WL Gore, to people who make Gore-Tex, way back in the mid 90s. And I was the computer guy. And ever since then, I've found out that probably the best training or best first job or initiation you can get to security and risk and compliance is to work for a manufacturer that makes something that a lot of people want to steal. They've got proprietary information, a lot of patents, things like that. So I learned some really, really hard and fast lessons way back then. And quite frankly, I kind of wandered off and did a lot of networking and routing and switching and all those types of things, and always found myself drawn back into security and risk, to the point that everything I've done the past 20 some years, with the exception of maybe 5 years as a CIO, has been the consulting space. This is only the second software company I've worked for. So I've worked at places like British Telecom, Hewlett Packard, SecureWorks, Lucent, and then finally with LogicGate and Optiv right before this. And as I kind of progressed in my career more and more, it became more and more risk centered, but it also became more and more business focused. As the talk tracks elevated and we went from the threat landscape to risk transformation and digital transformation, you just find yourself gravitating more and more towards, quite frankly, towards business people and what they're trying to get done in their business, which honestly led me to LogicGate. A lot of the work I was doing the past 2 or 3 years was at board level and C-suite level, and trying to provide these people answers. And we would get them some subjective data, or subjective opinions, some objective data mixed in. But I really wasn't seeing a way to get them something like a really good coherent answer, which led me to, among other solutions, we were trying out different things, and wound up here at LogicGate.
Okay. So can you tell us, explain what LogicGate offers to the industry, and why was there a need for your solution? Because there are so many players in the GRC space, and how you differ from other software providers?
Yeah, it is pretty unique. I mean, we're the leading SaaS GRC solution working in the whole, the whole enterprise risk environment. What I really do think is unique, and it's kind of the path that led me here. It goes back to the work I was doing the past 10 or 15 years. I started out, you can talk about competition. I started out like a lot of us did on big risk assessments and vulnerability assessments and things. We just had a lot of data we had to crunch and try and come up with reporting. And back when I was doing a lot of that, the only good, and it was a great solution at the time, was put stuff into Archer, hire a couple really good Archer consultants to build what you wanted built, and then keep them on staff to tweak and make this thing work as time went along. Then we had that sort of spurt of innovation where people sprung out of the Archers in different companies and built a discrete, quote, GRC tool. We had some pretty good ones, and I've known some of the founders of different companies who are now still our competitors. And then the logical progression of that, I think, is when people like our founders, Matt and John and Dan, who were, risk and compliance professionals doing consulting at the tip of the spear, figured out exactly what we needed in client environments, which was something much more lightweight, something that lent itself to almost instant innovation and change, something that could adapt to absolutely ridiculously rapidly changing compliance regulations around the world, and be pretty easy to use, which everybody says they are, but that's a big factor. So we've gotten to the point now that it literally is it's something that advisory, like my partners, advisory consulting firms can use in their engagements doing these big risk transformation projects, but that, when they figuratively leave it behind or put that in place as a solution, the clients aren't lost. It's usable. They don't have to be an Archer expert or hire people that know ServiceNow really well or something like that. It's something that's very, very powerful, relatively inexpensive, and quite frankly, easy to use. It checked a lot of boxes for me as my needs changed as a risk consultant.
Mm-hmm. So what are some major examples, some examples of your customers' use cases?
Sure. So it's funny. We say a lot of the time, it's quite true. A lot of our customer base looks a lot like we do. They may be in the technology and high tech manufacturing space. They may not have a whole lot of people, but they might have, relatively a lot of money under their control. There might be somebody that, like we were talking about right before this, that they're heavily online, or they're already undergoing that digital transformation. So they probably make something or do something or provide a service for a living, and they do it very efficiently with relatively few people. So our typical use case, quite frankly, they may not have a staff of risk and compliance people on hand. They may not have a chief privacy officer or chief risk officer or 100-person IT department and 30-person security department. But they may have, billions of dollars under their control and at risk, quite frankly. So that's kind of the typical client that we get. And we're also really heavy in financial and healthcare for obvious reasons. And as far as use cases, it really is in a lot of ways client driven. And like I said, we can shift on the fly pretty fast. So you go through, obviously when GDPR is hot, we found something that meets the GDPR market really, really fast, did it really well. And it's a wonderful application. It's built on our platform. Mm-hmm. Right now we're seeing a lot of people are talking about CMMC, FedRAMP compliance, SOC 2, vulnerability map, kind of the old traditional ones where people made, like I did, first dip their toe into the risk and compliance space with vulnerability management. Everybody's getting pen tested, everybody's got vulnerability assessments. It sort of gets tossed over the fence, and then they really don't know what to do with it. So vulnerability management, and we have a relatively new partnership with Tenable. We improved what we think was a really good vulnerability management application already, and amped it up, kind of a 1 + 1 = 5 model with a new partnership.
Mm-hmm. So I would like to hear your personal opinion. What is the commonly held belief or biggest misconception in the risk field, in GRC field, that you strongly disagree with?
So I always used to say, it was funny because GRC sometimes has a negative connotation. And I just had this conversation with someone yesterday. A lot of times when people hear GRC, they think PCI and HIPAA. Like all they hear is the compliance part of it. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, the majority of times in the past decade or so, GRC has always been something you had to do. It wasn't something you really wanted to do. And it's a little bit of an overused term when people talk about, security being an enabler, risk being an enabler. But I think the biggest misconception is that GRC does not, somehow inhibits a business. And the way I always thought of it, and the way I explain it to people that are sort of mulling this over is, if you've ever flown or seen a pilot, what they do before a flight, and they do a pre-flight checklist, and they literally walk around a plane and bang on things. They look at everything. Fighter pilots have a knee board that they're checking off everything before they even start the engines up. It's a pre-flight checklist. That doesn't mean that these pilots are, risk and compliance experts. They use these tools and methodologies to ensure that the plane gets off the ground. They're in the business of flying. So before that plane ever gets off the ground, you have to go through all these checklists and all, and that enables you to get off the ground. And that's, GRC in a nutshell to me. there's a lot of different things that people want to do. It's simple stuff. If you're you're trying to measure your risk. If you're a jeweler that goes to the bank every day at 4 o'clock with a bag of money, and you've never had a problem because you walk there with a bodyguard, but now you're thinking, this is a pain in the neck. Maybe I should do it on Sunday night when no one's actually around. It'll be dark. There's less traffic. No one sees me doing it. Maybe that's a good idea. Well, think about that a minute. There's nobody around. It's dark, and you're not gonna have your bodyguard. Have you actually thought about this and measured that risk? Like, you're going from one business process, how how you deliver your money, to a new business process, and you're just gonna go out there on Saturday night or Sunday night in the dark and walk to the bank and drop off a bag of money. That's kind of where we're at now. People need to start thinking in terms of GRC is a way that you could actually make really critical business decisions and have to make these decisions.
Okay. So, for example, if we take life of a risk manager, if there is one thing that they should start prioritizing right now that they are not doing currently, what would it be?
Two things. And one, they're sort of locked in with each other. I would say the most important thing is to immediately start getting closer and closer to the business. If the risk manager is only talking to their peers in the company, meaning security people and compliance people and other risk people, and worrying about just their piece of the puzzle, they're going to be an abject failure. A risk professional in any company should be talking to, the CFO and the chief legal officer, and they should be invited or making their presence known or getting themselves invited into business discussions. They need to know that the company is thinking about expanding manufacturing operations to Southeast Asia, or that there's trouble brewing at some factories they have. They've got union trouble in a certain state in the country. There's lots of things they need to be clued into in the business thing, instead of just what we're always accused of, being checklist compliance people. They need to get into the business and start being able to provide some answers. And coupled with that, the tough part of it is they need to quantify some of this stuff, because they can't get along anymore with handing some kind of heat map to someone asking for information saying, yeah, we're green, or we're yellow, we're red. They need to be able to say, if you want to start carrying that bag of money to the bank on Sunday night, your risk goes from 35% to 76%. We have to start assigning numbers, because our businesses and the people that we work with are worrying about these things, and they work on numbers. They don't work on red and green and yellow.
So maybe the same question, but another way around. What should risk managers stop doing right now that they are doing kind of a mainstream? What is the mainstream? And they should stop doing this.
Yeah, I would. And I got this pushback from dealing with people on boards a lot, board of director people at different companies, even where I've worked in the past. They ask some I always said, the higher you go in companies, the simpler the questions are, and potentially disastrous for your career. Because a board member or a CEO will ask you something really simple, like, what does good look like? And you can't show them a dashboard with just all green lights lit up and say, well, that's what good looks like. That's not what they're looking for. So what I would encourage risk managers to do is to nip what I've always called green dashboard disease in the bud. Stop looking downstream and making people that are working with you or under you provide you with data that you're pretty sure is suspect, and you repackage it and you move that data upstream. And these people that are making strategic decisions for the company in a business sense, where they're steering a ship, are relying on you and relying on that risk data to make a decision about which way to go. I've always said it's kind of like, you're honing this knife blade to be sharper and sharper and sharper, and any good, accurate data is better than false data, obviously. So start getting in a culture of asking for really good verified data. All we talk about is how much data is out there. Like, we're inundated with it. So we should be eminently capable, with all the tools and technologies we have available now, to start pulling the exact data we need and making sure it's accurate. Then we move that upstream. then we can start to give answers, and we can say, look, we made this decision based on knowing maybe 10 or 15% of the puzzle. And we're working really hard to gather more and more accurate data. So our answers can get more and more reliable as time goes on. But don't just provide that green dashboard and pass it up the line, because that's disastrous.
Okay, yeah, this is fair. I see more people talking about this kind of dashboard disease or kind of
Yeah.
scoring kind of indicators. So maybe without dropping the name, it will be interesting to know what you or your team have recently achieved that you are really proud of.
Oh, that's easy. I'll drop the name.
Okay, you can drop.
We have, my team in particular, I've got the team that handles partnerships. So we've got technology alliances, which is what it sounds like, finding great technology partners that we can either get the content that they have, integrate them with our product to make it better or more efficient, or partner with kind of what they do for a living. And again, make that, 1 + 1 = 3 or 1 + 1 = 5 model. And then on the professional services side, what we call solution provider side, we're making partnerships with companies that are just absolutely tip of the spear, bleeding edge, innovative, strategic thinkers that are doing really big risk transformation things. And quite frankly, need something like us to get this stuff done. So a couple of recent things we've done on the technology side, we have a partnership with Ascent. So Ascent, they're the kings of regulatory compliance. So we have a regulatory compliance application. But now that we have Ascent's content added into that, again, it makes a really powerful message. And then on the professional services side, we have partners that are basically built, I hate saying boutique, but they're smaller, really, really expert consulting firms that specifically go after, certain industries. So for the folks that are working in the finance industry, now that we have this enables them to do some really, really good stuff. They now have a model where they can go in and their clients don't have to worry about going back and manually updating banking regulations every 3 months or whatever, as these things are constantly changing and evolving. They have a living continuous risk monitoring model in place, between the advisory services and amazing technology solution. We're doing the same thing right now. I talked about vulnerability management. So we've got a partnership with Tenable. It's kind of the same thing. We have partners of ours on the solution provider side that are, just begging for help. And this is what drove me into the GRC space 10, 15 years ago. I was running 10,000 hour ethical hacking engagements, 10 people working for 3 months, producing an insane amount of data. And it really hasn't gotten that much better over the past 10 or 15 years. So now we've got something that we can enable our partners with, that they can get into a client where they've got some of these really unique needs with vulnerability management, use us as the workflow and automation platform, have all that amazing content from Tenable with, the Nessus scanners and everything being pulled in, the vulnerabilities, getting really close to this kind of risk automation process where they've got vulnerabilities coming in, remediation being taken care of, things are being pushed to the different business units in the company. It's really kind of an elegant solution to what a need I had 15 years ago. So they're two of the things we're really proud of.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what are the major trends in the GRC space that currently you see, and what we can expect for you guys in the future?
Sure. There's an interesting trend, and I think I know it in large part has been spurred by 2020 and Corona and this move to, work in different ways we did in the past. And that's the whole outsourcing kind of philosophy. There's a recent poll in February I saw that, I couldn't believe the number was this high, quite frankly. Computer Security Magazine, I think, had it. 83% of IT leaders want to outsource, security and risk functions. That's amazing. And I've worked for 4 managed security providers over the years. If we had numbers like that 10, 15 years ago, it would have been astonishing. We were trying to get people to outsource stuff. So now I think that there's going to be two big things. One's going to be automation. Again, our clients aren't in the risk and compliance business. They might, some of them may have departments or people that deal with that as 100% of their duties, but unless they're another LogicGate or something like that, or an Ascent, they're not doing it for a living. They're making widgets, or they're healing people, or they're running restaurant chains. So to get that done, they're doing it leaner with a workforce that may be remote. They need solutions that come pretty darn close to being fully automated. And I don't think risk is any different. We had 20 some years ago, configuring routers and switches and all that stuff. That was like a black art. I mean, that's when I was doing a lot of it. And it was a real big deal. You had to go hire. People don't talk about that stuff that much anymore. Things became very mundane and very in a weird way, they became less sexy. Like, it's really cool the past few years to say you're a hacker and you do pen testing and all these things, but everything's getting much more commoditized. And it kind of needs to. A lot of these things need to become operational so that the few people that are working at these companies can actually do their job. If you're the only compliance person at $1 billion company, or it's you doing compliance, a couple people in security, it's just 3 or 4 of you having to steer the ship. So everything you can do to take the operational things away and make your life easier, let you do your job. You can worry about the big picture. You can talk to the business leaders. So you can do what you're supposed to do, which is to enable your company. So I think that automation, outsourcing of these things, moving into a managed model is going to become a really big deal. And I think it should be. We've got clients asking for it, and I think they're asking the right question.
Okay, fantastic. Joseph, you're also a startup advisor. So could you tell us, what does it take to set up a successful business from as a SaaS company, maybe in JRC space or in general?
Yeah, in general, have money. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, there's a lot of, me included, I've spent, me and my friends over the years spend time sitting around drawing stuff on a napkin saying, man, if we had $5 million, this would be killer. There's a great leap between writing that down on a napkin and having the wherewithal and the gumption to go out and actually attack that problem and do it. I think there's a lot of great ideas out there going by the wayside. And in SaaS in general, I mean, SaaS in particular, or a lot of these new kind of cyber startups and things, I think it honestly boils down to your MVP, that first kind of beta that you go out and show people. And even then, I think it's really, really critical. Sometimes people will even build that first thing and build the app because they're a good coder, or they have a good idea and they have a buddy that can help them, make a framework for this thing at least. But they don't go out and get those 2 or 3 or 4 first innovative clients, good ones. Like, it can't be, my wife's flower shop or my dental practice or something. It's got to be a decent client that you can go out, embed this thing in, and quite frankly, they're willing to take the risk with you. So it's a bit of a sales job. You can't, very rarely can you just have a pure technical startup with, 3 technical people. You got to have somebody that could get out there and at least make that first, second, third deal and get that MVP in the hands of somebody that's really going to use it. Because once you get that referral, that's gold. It's like anything else, it's word of mouth. If you get somebody that's willing to speak up in your behalf and they're a good brand, you have a heck of a lot better chance. There's more than enough money out there right now.
Yeah, exactly.
The VCs are flooded with cash. They need to finance stuff, but they're not dumb. They're not just going to throw money at a pure idea.
The amount of unicorns now is kind of growing exponentially with also security space, privacy space. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. So just for my own perspective, we kind of run a global risk communities, a social network for risk managers. What is important for you? How can we potentially contribute to the process of better understanding of this complex world of risk?
I honestly, I would focus more on the business, quite frankly, it's still, it's like I started off with. Everything I learned back in the mid 90s being, the computer guy fixing Windows 95 machines and keeping the servers running and making sure the router didn't go down. But my real job, that was what I did every day for a living. My real job and what I was in charge of was making sure nobody stole our patents. That's what it really boiled down to. So I had a really intimate knowledge of what W.L. Gore did. Like the plant that I worked at made specific products. I had a very intimate knowledge of what we did. And it's like Animal Farm. All things are equal. Some are a little more equal than others. The biggest trick and the biggest thing that risk professionals can do to help other ones is that triage of not just staring like a deer in the headlights at this just flood of threats and risk in your environment, but figuring out which ones are more equal than others. It's like when I was doing a lot of pen testing and vulnerability assessments, you come across these things once in a while, but there's like 50 critical vulnerabilities and you think, oh my God. Well, I said some of them in that bunch of 50, there's always one where you look at the client and you think, you need to take a machete to the back of your wires right now. Like you got to get off the internet. This ain't like you're done. This is bad. And that doesn't happen all the time, but there's a lot of places where I think risk professionals get caught in a decision loop and bogged down a little bit with the inertia, and they can't really figure out what's most important for their company. It could be, if you have to be PCI compliant, that's great. Again, you need to operationalize a lot of that stuff. Get it done, get it out of the way. Don't spend 3 months with auditors every year. Be efficient at it. Get that done and get it off your plate. Then go worry about, what the expansion plans are for the business. And if this marketing campaign where, you've got people walking on the beach with iPads taking information from spring breakers, like how much risk does that introduce to your environment? They're the types of things we need to help each other elevate that conversation.
Okay, maybe just to finalize this, if someone who is listening to this interview would like to walk away with one or two takeaways, what would that be?
Calm down. It'll get better. You can do yourself a lot of good and make yourself a hero by involving yourself in the business, even if they don't want you to be, and then start knocking down some small victories and legitimize what you are and what you do for a living and become an asset to your company, your environment, your organization, whatever it may be. And always be studying. I mean, this stuff changes so much, and we work in a field that, the other security and risk people probably think of, GRC is kind of dry and, it's checkboxy and it's this and that. I think the complete opposite. I'm the ultimate generalist. If this stuff was dry, I wouldn't do it for a living. I need like variety in my life. So to me, I'm always having to learn about the entire threat and risk landscape and collate all this stuff in my head. And again, be trying to figure out like which ones are more equal than others in this space. So always be learning. It's a big one.
Okay, thank you. So that's were all my questions. If you have some questions that I might have forgotten, you would like to add?
No, this has been fun. I'd love to come back.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
I love talking shop. And again, I feel like, I have to go out and evangelize that what we do is pretty cool too.
Yeah. We have the two different type of interviews. First one is general as this one, and next time we can do a deep dive on a specific topic. So you're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. It's great to meet you.
Okay. Thank you, Joseph. Let me stop.